Hi everybody, welcome to Mentor and yet another video podcast. As always, I hope you're doing absolutely fantastic. This is a new segment of the Mentor Pilot channel, which I'm going to call Mentour Aviation News. I'm going to take some interesting news, some funny news from what happened during the last week, and I'm going to give it to you guys. Today, we're going to be talking about the potential return of the Boeing 737 MAX. What is left to do, where are they in the process, and how is the training going to look? We're also going to talk about the European suspension of the slot 80-20 rule and what that means for the industry. And we're going to be talking about a completely new thing that has popped up during the COVID-19 pandemic, which is called flight to nowhere. So stay tuned.
Wind 310 at 16, everyone right, right on. Third one and 31 right. Delta 260, yes sir, dude.
Okay guys, before we start today's episode, all of the news that you're going to hear about today is from the Mentour Aviation app. I have a couple of great administrators that spends their whole day finding and searching the internet for the best and most relevant aviation news, and then they put them in the app. So the app is available to you completely free of charge. You just have to download it and then you have access to the apps, to the chat, to the videos, and if you look at an article that you're interested in and then you click on the read more button inside of that, it's going to take you to whatever news outlet has created that story. So it is a really great tool to get an overview of what's going on in the industry, and I highly recommend you to go and download it right now and participate in the great community that we have inside of the app. Now to the news. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is the potential return to service of the Boeing 737 MAX. Now, the Boeing 737 MAX has been grounded for over 1.5 years now. It was grounded after 2 fatal accidents, and ever since then, Boeing has been working together with the FAA and many other aviation authorities all over the world in order to try to get it back in service again. Right now, we are on the final stretch of that work. And this week, a group of people called the Joint Operations Evaluation Board met up in Gatwick in London. And their target and their task is to have a look at the proposed training material that Boeing is putting out and see what they think about it. So this is a really important step, guys, because once this is concluded, then all of the pilots who are going to fly the 737 MAX is going to do the training that this task force comes up with. Most likely, it's going to be simulator training, maybe a couple of hours of simulator training for all the pilots, together with some theoretical training about the new systems aboard the MAX. And when this task force has done their job, then they will hand that work over to the FAA. Now, FAA has mandated a captain called Steve Dixon to be kind of the test rabbit to test this out. So Steve is going to go through the training program, and then he's going to go out and he's going to do some flying on the 737 MAX, and he's going to record all of the things that he experiences when he flies the aircraft. That material will be brought back to the FAA, and then once that is concluded and the FAA has taken on board all of his recommendations, then they can go for the final certification of the 737 MAX. Now, I should say as well that the FAA also have an airworthiness directive, an AD, out. Right now it's out for public comments, and the public comments would close on the 21st of September, so that's next week. And it's likely that this airworthiness directive is going to include some things that Boeing has to do before the aircraft is certified. However, Boeing is well aware of the work of this airworthiness directive, so it's likely that they are going to go through this last part of the certification process fairly rapidly. And they are hoping to be able to resume delivery of the 737 MAX to its customers towards the end of the 4th quarter of 2020. So that's where we are right now, and I, for one, am really looking forward to get my hands on this aircraft. I think it's going to be a fantastic aircraft, and I'm really looking forward to flying it. So the second news that I want to talk about today is the new waiver of the European Union's 80-20 slot rules. Now you might ask yourself, what is he talking about, 80-20 slot rules? But in fact, I did a video about ghost flights about 6 months ago, which explains this rules in detail. A basic overview of these rules is that these are rules regarding slots. Now, slots is times that an airline can use for a takeoff or a landing into a specific airport. And the reason these slots are so important is because most of the major airports in Europe, London, Heathrow, Gatwick, Paris Charles de Gaulle, Frankfurt Main, Stockholm, Barcelona, have very limited amount of these times, which means that they are very valuable, and most airlines want to get their hands on these slots. So there have been rules applied to these, and these slots are being sold at auction for the highest bidders. But the problem is that if you're an airline and you own slots into these airports and you're not using them, if you're not using more than 80% of the slots that you've bought, then those slots will go out back into the market and other airlines will be able to scoop them up. So this works fine during a normal condition when there's no COVID and everyone is flying to their maximum. But right now the airlines are actually trying to hunker down and fly as little as possible based on customer demand. So during this pandemic, it would have been fatal to remain with these 80-20 rules, because airlines would be forced to fly empty in order to just protect their slots against other airlines. So at the beginning of the pandemic, the European Commission went out and they waived the rules for the entire summer of 2020. They hoped that towards the end of the summer, then this pandemic wouldn't have had as much impact on the aviation industry as it had. But obviously right now we know that it was much worse than what they thought. So they've decided to continue to waive these rules up until the beginning of summer of 2021. But the airline industry is already asking for them to continue to waive these rules and to avoid ghost flights to reappear again until maybe, the whole of 2021. And the industry is actually thinking that it might take as long as to 2024 before the industry is back to where it was in 2019. So we're all going to have to sit and wait and see what happens with this. The European Commission has listened to the industry and have done what they've asked for so far. But unfortunately, they've also noticed that some airlines have engaged in what's called anti-competitive behavior. This means that they have noticed that some of these airlines are maintaining their slots, even though it's obvious for everyone that they're not going to be using them. And the reason they're doing this is to stave up competition, to make sure that no one else can come in and compete on a specific airport. And the European Commission made it very clear that if they see this kind of anti-competitive behavior, then there will be consequences for those involved. So we can only sit back and hope that everyone is playing by the rules now and everyone is trying to help each other out in this very, very bad situation for the aviation business. But otherwise, the European Commission, and I'm guessing all of the other aviation authorities out there as well, is going to do their part to make sure it doesn't happen. Now, the last thing that I wanted to cover in this episode about aviation news is a funny thing that is starting to appear because of the COVID-19 travel restrictions. So all over the world, the countries have been closing down their borders and effectively stopping people from traveling and airlines from flying to their destinations. And because of this, there is now a pent-up need among the population to fly. And also, the airlines desperately want to get their aircraft and their aircrew and cabin crew back up in the air. And because of that, something has popped up now that I have never seen before in my career, and that is flights to nowhere. And what I mean by that is that airports, for example, like Taipei, who have recently done a huge refurbishment of their terminal, noticed that, of course, the amount of passengers in the terminal went down with over 64% in the beginning of the pandemic. So in order to show off their new terminal building and to keep people interested in traveling, they sold tickets to a raffle where the winners would be able to go in, check in for a flight as if they were going somewhere, get a lounge experience, go through the airport shops and see everything in the airport, and then board an aircraft. But that's where the experience would stop. They wouldn't actually go anywhere. So after they boarded, they would just deboard and go home. And you would think that that would be a strange thing to buy a ticket for, but in fact they had more than 7,000 people applying for this one opportunity. It just goes to show how interested people still are when it comes to flying. But there have been other airlines and companies that have gone further than that. ANA Airlines, for example, have really wanted to keep their Airbus 380s kind of fit for fight for when the travel returns and when they can start flying back to Hawaii again from Tokyo. And one thing that they did, basically just to see if it worked, was they announced a flight where people would be able to book a ticket on one of their famous Airbus A380s, and they would come in, sit down in the aircrafts, they would take off, they would fly for about 1.5 hours around Tokyo for like a sightseeing flight, and they would be offered some in-flight meals and some light snacks and drinks, and then land back to where they came from, and that would be it. They found that there was an enormous interest in this. So big, in fact, that they've decided to continue doing this service. The first flights went in August, and they have scheduled flights throughout September and October as well. The next airline that did something similar was Starlux Airlines. Now, Starlux was set to start their operation during the pandemic, but obviously the pandemic have stopped that from happening. But Starlux Airlines still wanted to show off their services, so they did the same as ANA did, and they offered their passengers the possibility to come for a sightseeing flight over the South China Sea. They took off, they flew, did the route, come back, landed, passengers went off and was equally happy with it. And once again, Starlux Airlines have found that this is a working way of keeping their fleet flying, so they're going to continue to offer these kind of flights. But maybe the most famous of these flights to nowhere flights, which actually happened historically as well, are Qantas Airlines flights from Australia down over Antarctica to do sightseeing over Antarctica and then back to the destination. Historically, these flights have been done by their famous Boeing 747 aircraft, but since Qantas have retired their 747 fleet during the pandemic, the new 12-hour sightseeing flights down to Antarctica is going to be done by their brand new Boeing 787 aircraft. And I, for one, would love to go on a flight like that. Go down, get a little bit of flying done, see Antarctica, and then come back in again. But the question then is, of course, why are airlines doing this? Well, there are several good reasons for it. Now, if you watched my video about how to store an aircraft, you can have a look up here, there's a link to it. You know that the longer an aircraft stands on the ground, the more kind of maintenance does it need to go through, both to keep it on the ground, but also before it can come back into service again. And because of that, it's normally better for airlines to actually get their fleet of aircraft flying a little bit, and also by doing so they can keep their pilots and their air crew up to date and in flying condition, and they can get their cabin crew to maybe even get some auxiliary revenue by selling stuff on board. So by getting passengers to actually pay to go out and do this maintenance flight, they actually, there's a win-win-win situation for everyone. And this is why we see this. Now guys, if you are interested to see news like this, really sharp kind of views into what's happening in the aviation business and incidents and accidents, as well as just curiosity things and interesting and funny things that's happening in the aviation industry, then make sure that you have downloaded the Mentour Aviation app. All right. Once again, the app is completely free. There is links in the description here of the video. You can just get it and check out the news, and also participate in the chat with people like me, trained pilots, people who are training to go on pilots, and people who are afraid of flying and nervous flyers. There's a huge and great community of people in there who would love to speak to you about your interest in aviation. And that's it. That's all I had for today. Have an absolutely fantastic day wherever you are, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Right guys, I really hope that you liked that. If you want more content like that, more aviation content, well then check this out. I hope that you have subscribed to the channel and that you've highlighted the little notification bell. See you inside of the Mentour Aviation app, and have an absolutely fantastic day. Bye-bye.